Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Manitoba START is the leading provider of career services to newcomers in the province of Manitoba and connects businesses to a world-class workforce. I would like to welcome you all to the Spotlight webinar series, a series of live broadcasted events designed to assist you in entering the Manitoba labor market. Manitoba START acknowledges that we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Ote, Dunsulami, and Nitinamak nations, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge that our water is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. As a newcomer serving organization, we commit to learning about the histories, cultures, and rights of the Indigenous communities. We strive to build a respectful and supportive relationship for all. Today's webinar is focusing on the spotlight of nurses. The licensed practical nurse, registered nurses, and registered psychiatric nurses. The College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba is Manitoba's registered nursing regulator and is responsible for overseeing the practice of registered nursing in our province. The College of Licensed Practical Nurses of Manitoba is the professional regulatory body for licensed practical nurses in Manitoba. And the College of Registered Psychiatric Nurses of Manitoba is the regulatory body for the psychiatric nursing profession in Manitoba. Before we begin our webinar, I'll be going over a couple of housekeeping items. So you can raise your hand feature to indicate that you have a question or a comment. To do this, you could click on the participants button in meeting controls, find the raise hand icon next to your name and click on it. This will notify us that we have raised a hand. Teams webinar provides a Q&A feature that allows attendees to ask questions, specifically in the Q&A panel. To access this, click on the More Options, the three dots button in the meeting controls, and select Q&A. You can then type your question in the Q&A panel. So now I would like to welcome our presenters. Welcome, Ryan.
I'm good to go.
You are good to go.
Okay, I am going to share my screen with everyone. Okay, let's just... All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Ryan Shimko. I am the Deputy Registrar and Practice Consultant with the College of Registered Psychiatric Nurses of Manitoba. My presentation's usually a bit shorter than the CRNMs and the CLPNMs, simply because we really go with what we call a right door approach. And because psychiatric nursing is a specialized profession around the world, we know that a lot of people may not have the competencies or the background, but for those of you that do, and that you are trained as a psychiatric nurse in your home country, you know, we are the really the regulator that regulates registered psychiatric nurses in Canada. So I'll tell you a little bit about us. So we know that there's three distinct nursing regulatory bodies in Manitoba. So we've already talked a little bit about that. We all have different requirements for registration and different education programs. And our big thing is that we want to ensure that applicants who apply to our college best fit your competency, so that if you were trained as a psychiatric nurse in your home country, that you fit what we require in terms of becoming a registered psychiatric nurse in Manitoba. So we want to make sure that applicants don't waste their time or money at the wrong door. So I'll give you an example. So we occasionally will have applicants from the Philippines who maybe work in mental health or have taken some mental health education, and they apply to our college. We know that the Filipino programs, the nursing programs, do not have enough mental health in order to qualify to work as a registered psychiatric nurse in Manitoba. Typically Filipino trained nurses would not meet our requirements. One of the big things is that psychiatric nursing programs only exist in a few countries, and it's mostly the Commonwealth countries. So, you know, UK, former UK colonies. We know that it exists in South Africa, Hong Kong. Certain African countries like Nigeria and Ghana have psychiatric nursing programs. We do know that India has some specialized psychiatric nursing programs. So we know kind of typically the countries that have the specialized psychiatric nursing programs and those that don't. And so we always try to make sure that when people are applying to us, that they're hitting the right door. If, you know, we determine that you'd be better off to apply with the CRNM or the CLPNM, we also do give that advice or that guidance that it might be better for you to apply to one of the other colleges based on either what your competencies are or your education programs. So anyone, we call IEPNs, I know you've heard the term IEN, we call our applicants internationally educated psychiatric nurses. So as I said, anyone who's educated as a registered psychiatric nurse or psychiatric nurse outside of Canada can apply to our college. You must be currently registered or eligible to register in your country of practice. So basically you have to either have registration or eligible to register. So for example, a recent graduate from a program. We have this disclaimer here at the bottom about registered nurses. So RNs with the specialization in mental health may or may not qualify, depending on the education program in which you received your education. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the requirements because we do get sometimes registered nurses that apply to our college. It really depends on the depth and breadth of your education program in terms of whether you may qualify or may not. So I use the example of a Filipino applicant. We know that none of the Filipino nursing programs have enough of the mental health piece in order to qualify as a registered psychiatric nurse. But for example, applicants that we have that come from Nigeria, they train typically as a registered nurse first and then receive post-baccalaureate or diploma education as a registered psychiatric nurse. So Nigerian applicants, for the most part, would qualify because of their specialization in mental health. So some of our requirements for registration. So everyone who applies has to have 500 hours of theoretical knowledge, basically in what we call the psychiatric nursing realm. So that includes the development of therapeutic relationships, psychosocial interventions. So for example, the modalities, CBT, dialectical behavior therapy, those types of things. That also includes individual counseling or individual therapy, family systems therapy, those types of things. You have to have specific training in mental health and mental illness. So for example, a psychopathology course, psychiatric medications, psychopharmacology. So a lot of our training is dedicated not only towards pharmacology, but specifically the mental health medications that we administer, and then specific focus on psychiatric nursing ethics. So we also have 225 hours related to the development of general nursing competencies. So these are some of your foundational concepts for nursing or nursing theory. All registered psychiatric nurses have to have completed a health assessment course. There has to be coursework in pathophysiology, diagnostic methods. So for example, lab results, diagnostic imaging, those types of things. You have to have specific training in treatment approaches, medical surgical nursing interventions, and then care planning. So you can see the overlap between registered psychiatric nursing and registered nursing and licensed practical nursing. really in this area or this field. So we do accept other coursework, and it can be up to 275 hours. And those are really like the courses that you might take, your intro psychology course, your intro sociology, women's studies, indigenous studies would be another example of coursework that we accept. There has to be life sciences. So for example, intro to biology or human anatomy and physiology. And then there has to be research methods and statistics as well. So as you can see, ours is very specific in terms of what you need in order to qualify as a registered psychiatric nurse. So if you're kind of sitting there wondering, do I meet these requirements? A copy of this presentation will be provided so you can go back and look at it to see whether your education might meet the requirements for registration. So in terms of clinical practice hours, sorry, went too far. We have a minimum of 1,000 clinical practice hours. And so those clinical practice hours must include a minimum of 775 clinical hours in psychiatric nursing. What I tend to find is that a lot of applicants will have the theoretical basis, so you might take a lot of coursework. Usually the issue that we see is that most applicants do not have enough of the clinical hours in psychiatric nursing. So they might have 500 or 600 hours. It might be just in adult populations, whereas, in our field, it's with child and adolescents, it's with adults, it could be with elderly adults, it could be in forensic areas. So we really see how our clinical areas spread the gamut around mental health. So that's something just to think about if you're thinking of applying to our college, those clinical hours. And then, of course, all registered psychiatric nurses also have to have a minimum of 225 clinical hours in general nursing. So that's your general medical surgical nursing. In our programs, we call Intro to Med Surg, so it's usually a 6 credit hour course. So you have to have that as well. Now, usually if you're a registered nurse or a licensed practical nurse, you're likely going to have those clinical hours in general nursing, but you may not have the clinical hours in psychiatric nursing. So if you determine that you meet our requirements or you feel that you meet our requirements, we do have a direct path through the National Nursing Assessment Service. I know that some regulators do not use NNAS anymore. We still use NNAS because it produces a report that I use to evaluate whether in fact you meet the criteria for our profession. So in order to open a file with us, you have to have a completed NNAS report and an NNAS ID number. The link is there for those of you, I'm sure many of you are already familiar with NNAS. And for us, you need to have your NNAS file complete before you can start your application. And so that's because we need to get a copy of that report. I need to get a copy of that report so that we can open your file and then we can begin our education assessment. So in terms of what we require, you have to pay an online application fee. I believe that's $152.50. You have to complete your online application, which is really simple. Most people can get that done, within an hour. We do need the proof of identification documents. So for example, a birth certificate, photo ID, name change. So if you've been married or if you've been married and then divorced and you went back to a maiden name, we would need all copies of your name changes. We also require a criminal record check with a vulnerable sector search and a child and adult abuse registry check if you are physically located in Manitoba. If you are applying and your most recent residence was, say, in your home country, then we would just require a criminal record check from your home country. But if you are landed and living in Manitoba, we would require all three. So that would be the criminal record check and the child and adult abuse registry check. We also require a confirmation of registration form. So it's a super simple form that you fill out and you send to your regulatory body in your home country or the place that you last worked in order for them to let us know that you're still in good standing and that you are eligible to work as a registered psychiatric nurse. We also need an employer reference, which would come from your previous employers. And then the last one is proof of English language ability, which basically is a declaration that your first language is English and that it's the language that you speak and read and write with, primarily in either your role or in your home life. So we talk a little bit about that. English is your first language. If it is the language you learned at home, and the language is used primarily for reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We also do accept, if you trained, if say your nursing or psychiatric nursing education program was delivered in English, we would accept that as well. We did change our requirements recently around English language proficiency. So essentially, if you've trained or studied and your program was delivered in English, we would accept that as well. Now, we've also changed our English language requirements in terms of the tests that we require. There's now a total of 5 that we accept, and you can go to our website if you need to submit a test. But this has not really been an issue for really any of our applicants, as most of our applicants meet the English language requirement by having trained in a program that was delivered in English, or by virtue of speaking and using English in your day-to-day life. So let's assume that you've completed your application. We have all of your documents. We have your NNAS report. Once that's completed, the education assessment takes place. Because we are a small college, I am the one who does the educational assessments. And basically, I'm going to look at that report to see maybe where there's gaps in your training or education. The great majority of our applicants, I would say, usually falls as somewhat comparable. So it means that you meet a lot of the competencies for the profession, but there's usually some gaps, usually around therapeutic relationships, that usually need to be done. And I'll talk a little bit about like what some of those outcomes might be. It's very rare that we have an applicant who comes out as totally comparable. In the 15 years I've been with the college, I could probably think of about 4 or 5 applicants who absolutely met all of our criteria. Usually it's because they've taken a master's degree in psychiatric nursing in their home country, or they've taken some form of additional education that really allows for the comparison to a psychiatric nursing education program in Canada. We approve our entry-level psychiatric nursing programs based on education requirements. Our education assessment is generally completed within 4 to 6 weeks. Depending on how much I have going on, I can usually get it done actually a little bit more quickly once we have the report. But it really depends on, you know, how much work I have going on. But we do endeavor to get an assessment done within 4 to 6 weeks of me receiving the report. And then once that report is completed, and once your education assessment is completed, I will notify you by email with a letter, basically stating where you sit and what your next steps are in order to proceed with your application. So we basically have 3 potential outcomes that come from my assessment. If you are deemed to be completely comparable, you are granted eligibility to write the Registered Psychiatric Nurses Canadian exam. So like I said, we've had a handful of applicants who have met the requirements right from the outset. They automatically are granted eligibility to go and write the registration exam. The big thing here is that if you get to this step, it has to be done within 2 years of the date that we issue the letter to you. And I know for some people, you know, things change. Maybe you don't have the financial means, or you may not have the finances in place at that point. But we do really stick to that 2 years of the date of the letter. So that's something that we often flag to people, is that you have to write the exam, do your first attempt within the first 2 years of the date of that letter. If you're somewhat comparable, and I would say this is the majority of our applicants fall into the somewhat comparable category, that means that there's some gaps that are identified. And so we do require some remediation to fill those gaps. We have 2 avenues, so we don't do a clinical competence assessment. It's not available to us. So basically, if you are determined to be somewhat comparable, you have your choice of which route you'd like to go. The first route is through Douglas College. Douglas College is a university in British Columbia. And depending on what courses are identified from that, most of it can be done online, with the exception of a clinical rotation. And if that's the case, if you do need to do a clinical rotation, that would be facilitated between Douglas College and a facility somewhere in Manitoba. So because most of those can be done online, it's actually pretty simple. You register for the coursework based on what my recommendation is. And then once it's done, you are considered to be eligible for the exam. The other pathway is with a private consultant that we use by the name of John Collins. Some of you may already be familiar with him because I know he does a lot of work with registered nurses and licensed practical nurses. And John Collins would do an assessment. He would make a recommendation to me in terms of what pathway he feels that we should go in terms of, addressing those gaps. And then we would either use the Douglas College program or John Collins. And the last category is for someone who's not comparable. Basically, we would send a letter letting you know that you're not comparable to a psychiatric nursing education program. And then we offer a couple of options if you feel that your education wasn't well represented, or maybe you have additional education that wasn't included in the report. We might be able to do a reassessment depending on that. Or if you were to take a clinical competence assessment out of British Columbia, and it came out as somewhat comparable, we also would be willing to reconsider based on that. So our registration process, we always like to be really clear that it can take a fair bit of time to complete. Depending on the process with NNAS, the NNAS process can take anywhere from a year to 2 years, depending on how quickly your documents are submitted to NNAS. I will say that once we receive the NNAS report, it gets a lot faster. So basically, once your application is done and we've received all of those documents, that can take a few weeks. The education assessment, the report comes to me, I complete the assessment, and we send you a letter. I would say typically that piece, once we receive the report, will take about 4 to 6 weeks. So you should have an answer about where you stand, whether you're comparable, somewhat comparable, or not comparable, usually within 4 to 6 weeks. One of the other things is that we often get applicants who complete the process, and you also can be eligible for graduate psychiatric nurse registration while you wait to write the RPNCE, or while you wait to write the national exam. And we do see a lot of applicants who take that up because they can apply for jobs. A lot of them will land positions as graduate psychiatric nurses while they wait to write the exam. And then the last piece is that once the exam is passed, you are granted full registration as a registered psychiatric nurse. So I would say as a whole, the process from start to finish, and we're going to say starting with your application to NNAS can take anywhere from 1 year. I've seen people complete everything in as little as 1 year. And I've seen people take up to 2 years, depending on how quickly they either we get the NNAS report, and then how quickly the application process goes. So that should give you just some sense in terms of how long it takes to complete our process. I've seen people do it even in less than 1 year, depending on how quickly they get those documents in. So a bit of a hopeful note in terms of if you are applying to the college that the process can actually be fairly quick once the NNAS piece is completed. So like I said, I'm quick. This is my presentation in a nutshell. My contact information is there. I will be providing a copy of the slides to Manitoba Start. So if anyone would like a copy, you are more than welcome to access it. All of my contact information is there. If you have more questions, or if you're wondering maybe if you are might be eligible, we can always have a discussion about your education program, some of those things, and we can figure out maybe what's the best pathway for you. So that about wraps it up for me. As I said, my contact information is there. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to speak today, and I am going to turn it back over.
Thank you, Ryan. Up next, we have Karina. Karina, welcome.
Actually, it's going to be me, Miranda, presenting.
Oh, sorry,
today.
Miranda.
No problem.
My apologies.
No problem. Okay. Okay. So yes, my name is Miranda Noel, and I'm the registration advisor at the College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba. Joining me from the college today is Karina Alvarado. She is our registration pathway coordinator. And I will be providing you with her contact information at the end of this presentation, so that if you have any questions, you have somebody you can reach out to. But we will get started. So in this presentation, I'm going to cover what our mission and values are at the College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba, our role in professional regulation, and the registration process and requirements for obtaining RN registration sorry, in Manitoba as an internationally educated nurse via the standard application pathway. So our vision is that we are focused on sustaining patient safety and broader public benefit through meaningful registered nursing practice solutions for Manitoba healthcare. And our mission is to protect and serve the public interest through quality registered nursing regulation. Our values, trusted. We act with integrity in every interaction as the best way to enhance our sustained regulatory impact and to ensure our standing as a reputable, trustworthy, and unbiased partner. We're progressive. We seek progress, embrace risks, and pursue innovative operational and regulatory practices to ensure our continued excellence and impact in a dynamic environment. Accountable, we are transparent and take ownership for our actions, decisions, and outcomes. And we're relationship oriented. We challenge the status quo for meaningful collaboration with partners and greater transparency and ease of navigation for applicants, registrants, and the public. So what is professional regulation? Professional regulation, it's a privilege and a responsibility granted to professions by government on behalf of the people of Manitoba. It's essentially in acknowledging that a profession itself can best determine the standards for education and practice, and then ensure that these standards are met. And it's the College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba that's charged with carrying out the responsibilities of professional regulation for registered nurses in Manitoba. Our regulatory authority comes from the RHPA, the Regulated Health Professions Act, which we became governed under on May 31st of 2018. And in accordance with the RHPA, it's also in accordance with our regulations, our bylaws, and college policies that we set based on RHPA. And how do we regulate? So we are responsible for setting the standards for RN and RNNP's education, the registration requirements, and practice. We then also support RNs and RNNPs in meeting these standards and take action when the standards are not met. So this slide is an overview of the steps in the application process for an internationally educated nurse to become registered as an RN in Manitoba through our standard IEN application pathway. So the standard pathway is for those that have graduated from a nursing program outside of Canada and have never obtained RN registration in Canada. So in this presentation, we're going to go through each one of these steps individually with a bit of detail provided. If you've completed your nursing education or worked in the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, or the UK, you may fit into one of the other IN application pathways we have available. And if that's the case, I would invite you to visit our website and reach out to us directly for more information. So the first step for an IN applying in this pathway is to apply for an education credential assessment from one of the accepted service providers. We accept the National Nursing Assessment Service, Comparative Education Service, International Credential Assessment Service of Canada, and then World Education Service. So we're looking for a course-by-course report type. And then once this education credential assessment is received, you may then apply to the college. And it's important to note that in order to be eligible to apply for RN registration in this pathway, you must either currently be registered in the country where you received your entry-level nursing education, or you must have been registered there in the past. So once your education credential assessment report is received, you can apply to the college, and you'll do this by creating a, it's called a CRPNM profile. You'll also have to complete the IEN application form that's on our website, and then you upload that completed application along with a copy of photo ID, and then you submit payment again online. Once the application is received and reviewed, we'll contact you by email to let you know that you can view additional requirements to complete your file by logging into your profile. The application fee is currently $819, so $483 is the application processing fee. That portion of the fee is non-refundable, and this fee includes the $336 assessment fee. So next, you'll need to meet the additional requirements that are outlined for you. These requirements include, of course, the education credential assessment report that we'll gather once you've applied. Any verifications of registration. So this is a document, as Ryan mentioned, that is sent to any regulatory body you're currently registered with or have been registered with in the last 7 years, and you have verification of that sent to us directly from those third parties. We also require background checks. So this would include a criminal record check, including a vulnerable sector search, as well as Manitoba child and adult abuse registry checks. English language proficiency is a requirement for all applicants applying to the college, and can be met in a variety of different ways that we'll talk about. It's not necessarily a requirement that you need to meet right off the hop, but as we go through the process, you'll see where it might fit in for you. So once all those application requirements are met, your file is then forwarded for review. And so when we conduct this part of the review, we're ensuring that there's no other outstanding issues with your registration in other jurisdictions. There's no issues on your background checks. And then we're also looking at your file to determine if our criteria for nursing education comparability and eligibility to be referred for a clinical competence assessment has been met. So in accordance with policy AA7, our prior learning assessment policy, for applicants applying through this standard pathway, nursing education is considered comparable by the college if there's evidence that the post-secondary nursing education prepares the nurse for a generalist role in situations of health and illness along the health continuum and includes providing care across the lifespan to people of all ages, to all genders, and across diverse practice settings, and that the theoretical instruction was also accompanied by clinical practice placements, which included provision of direct care in all applicable settings. So this means we're looking for education in theory and in clinical hours in specialty populations such as gerontology, pediatric, maternal newborn, mental health. So we're looking across the lifespan in both of those areas. If it's determined that the nursing education comparability has been met, then the applicant is eligible to be referred for a clinical competence assessment. If the nursing education comparability has been determined not to have been met, so there's maybe education isn't across the lifespan or there's no clinical hours in some of these areas, the applicant would not be eligible to proceed in the registration process, and the file would be closed. And this is where a refund of the $336 for the assessment fee would be refunded to the applicant. So if the nursing education comparability requirements are met, the applicant file is then assessed against additional criteria to determine if you meet the NREP option eligibility. So the additional criteria that we're looking at is if English language proficiency has been met, and if the applicant has passed the NCLEX RN in the 4-year period immediately before the application date. Of note, the college has continually reviewed and updated measures of English language proficiency and the ways in which language proficiency can be met. So it's not just by way of an English language proficiency test, but there are a variety of ways that are outlined in policy and which is available on our website. So if the additional criteria are met, the applicant's provided with the option to either complete the full complement of courses in the nurse reentry program at Red River College Polytech instead of completing the CCA. So the clinical competence assessment. A referral for the clinical competence assessment, again, is made for those who meet the nursing education comparability requirements, but not the additional criteria, or for those that were provided with the option to complete the NREP and have chosen to go the route of completing a clinical competence assessment. The CCA is evaluating practice against the entry-level competencies for registered nurses in Manitoba. So entry level, meaning they're the competencies that are expected at the point of initial registration or licensure following graduation from an approved Manitoba nursing education program. It includes both written, generally computer-based written, and clinical simulation components. It's not a pass or fail assessment, but rather more of a gap assessment to determine if there is any remediation required, and if so, what type. And it provides the applicant with an opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge, skill, and judgment in practice. I'll note that the college is in the process of securing and finalizing a new CCA provider, as the assessment center currently utilized at the University of Manitoba will no longer be providing assessments after February of this year. So stay tuned and watch our website for any additional information in regards to that. So once the clinical competence assessment is completed, the college receives the report and determines the outcome from there. So at this point, if it's determined that from these results, the entry-level competencies have been met sufficiently, the applicant would then be eligible to continue in the registration process of applying to either write the NCLEX or applying for RN registration if the NCLEX requirement had already been met. If there are gaps noted in the entry-level competencies that require some remediation, the applicant would be required to complete the remedial education prior to writing the NCLEX or becoming registered as an RN. And the type of remediation required is based on the extent of the gaps that are identified. So it could include some or all of the nurse reentry program, or it could include an entry-level nursing education program that's approved by the council of the college. So for those where it's been determined that remediation through the nurse reentry program is required, the college will send that referral over to Red River College Polytech. Or for those that have determined that they'd like to pursue this option, who were given the option of completing the CCA or the NREP, it's the college that makes that referral to Red River College. So once that course of instruction is complete, Red River College sends us a course completion letter. and we confirm that all courses as required were completed, and we review your file to provide you with guidance on the next steps. So we will move on to the NCLEX. So the NCLEX RN, of course, is the National Entry to Practice exam for all RNs in Canada. So applicants that haven't previously completed the NCLEX will submit an application for exam eligibility to write, to write the NCLEX. Those that have maybe already passed the NCLEX will submit the application for RN registration. So again, the NCLEX is measuring those entry-level competencies, and it's regulatory bodies such as the College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba that determines an applicant's ability or eligibility to write the exam. And it would be at this point in the process where file documents that have expired would require updating in order for this next application to be approved. So this could include verifications of registration or background checks. Once all application requirements are met, the application is approved, and the applicant may then schedule their test date with the testing company. The college is notified of the exam results once the exam is written, and then we notify the applicant by email of their results. So it's always important, and I should have mentioned at the beginning, is that you provide us with an email address that you use and check frequently. Graduate nurse registration. So applying for a graduate nurse registration is not mandatory if you're not planning to work as a graduate nurse. But if you are intending to work as a graduate nurse, then you have to submit an application and become registered as a graduate nurse with the college. It's also important to mention that you can't be approved for graduate nurse registration until you have been approved to write the NCLEX and you've scheduled your NCLEX writing. There are a few additional requirements for graduate nurse registration. This includes some jurisprudence learning modules and obtaining liability protection. And then finally, RN registration. So of course, the last step in the process is RN registration. So once we've received your successful NCLEX results, you can then proceed with submitting an application for RN registration. Again, this is all through your CRNM profile. And this information would be provided to you when we send you your NCLEX results. So we do provide ongoing communication in regards to the next steps in the process. So after submitting your application for RN registration and meeting any requirements that may be outstanding, so again, if any documents require updating, your application will then be reviewed and approved, and you would receive formal notification confirming your registration by email. We also then encourage individuals to verify your registration using our online public registry, which is called Nurse Check. RNs in Manitoba are required to renew their registration annually, so even after you're registered, you will want to continue to read all email correspondence from us and stay informed to ensure that you're able to successfully renew each year. It's also important to note that the title and designation of RN is protected in Manitoba legislation, and it can only be used by an individual whose name appears on the registered nurse register. And this is the same as graduate nurse as well. This last slide includes some additional resources that you can refer to. There's a IEN application process handbook that's available on our website. It outlines all of the steps that we reviewed here today, and with a little bit more detail. You might also want to review the Red River College Polytech website for information related to the nursery entry program. And I'll just note that processes and requirements are subject to change. So I do encourage you to visit our website for the most up-to-date information or reach out to us prior to applying. So if you have any questions regarding the information we reviewed today, or if you need assistance in determining the correct application path, pathway or help with submitting your application, please feel welcome to reach out to us. Specifically, you can contact our registration pathway coordinator, Karina. Her information is available up on the screen right now if you want to jot that down. Again, I believe we'll be providing these slides so that you might have them for future reference, but the contact information is also available on our website. So please do feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you have. And that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Miranda. Now we'll invite Christy to speak.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having the CRPNM present today on the pathway to registration for IENs in Manitoba. So the practical nursing profession is a self-regulating profession, and the privilege and responsibility of self-regulation has been granted by the government on behalf of the people of Manitoba. The authority to regulate the profession comes from the Licensed Practical Nurses Act, as well as regulations, bylaws, and policies. And this year, the CRPNM will actually be celebrating its 80th year of regulating practical nurses. And the CRPNM's mandate comes from the Act, and it is to serve and protect the public interest. So a little bit about scope of practice. So LPNs aren't really well known around the world. So to set some context, I'll quickly discuss LPN scope of practice in Manitoba. So when compared to LPNs, when compared globally, LPNs in Manitoba have the deepest and broadest education and scope of practice. Most countries don't have licensed practical nurses, and those jurisdictions that do have LPNs do not have the broad scope that Manitoba LPNs have. So in Manitoba, LPNs work autonomously. This means that they do not work under the direction of a physician or another nurse. They work with clients with complex, unstable, and unpredictable conditions. They work with clients across the entire lifespan, so all the way from newborns to geriatrics. And they work in all areas of practice, such as emergency medicine, maternity, surgery, critical care, and long-term care. So it's important to note that the Manitoba pathway provides you with the best opportunity for success. It assists you with integrating into the Manitoba healthcare workforce by preparing you to manage the full scope of practice as an LPN in Manitoba. So here's a little bit of an overview. So the first part of the process towards registration as an LPN in Manitoba involves applying through the NNAS. We suggest that you visit their website for detailed information on the application process. And in the next slide, I'll provide you with some information on NNAS and discuss the application process with the CRPNM. So the CRPNM uses the FAIR approach by considering each applicant as a unique individual. So we do have a standardized process, but it is not a one-size-fits-all. The CRPNM works hard to ensure that we use a fair and reasonable approach while following the LPN Act regulations, bylaws, and policies, and the Fair Registration Practices Act. So as no one applicant is the same, we do encourage you to contact the CRPNM for accurate information regarding your specific application process. In today's presentation, I'll walk you through the IEN application process towards obtaining registration as an LPN with a CRPNM. And we'll discuss the following steps in the application process. So the NNAS service, opening a file with the CRPNM, clinical competence assessment, bridging education, and graduate practical nurse registration, and the Canadian Practical Nurse Registration Exam, and licensed practical nurse registration. So step one is to apply to NNAS. While you're in the process of applying and completing your application with NNAS, you can also begin the application process with the CRPNM. So this means that you can apply to the CLPNM before NNAS has completed the review of your application and your advisory report is ready. So the NNAS provides an expedited process for the CLPNM. Your NNAS advisory report will be issued within 5 business days of all documents being received. This service applies to all current and new NNAS applicants identifying the CLPNM in their application. So once the CLPNM receives your advisory report, it must provide evidence that you have graduated from an entry-level nursing education program. Step 2 is to apply to the CLPNM. The application process is completed online, and you must submit 2 forms of valid government ID, one of them being with a photo. You must submit your suitability checks that must be within 6 months of issue. So that's your criminal record check with vulnerable sector search, as well as your child and adult abuse registry checks. And you can upload your government ID and the suitability checks directly into your online application. You must also answer all the questions in the application related to education, registration, and work experience. You have to answer disclosure questions and pay the application fee. And once you've completed your application and it has been reviewed, that also includes receiving verification of registrations, as was previously mentioned by the other colleges as well. Then we'll refer you for a clinical competence assessment. So to expedite your process, you may be referred to a CCA before the CLPNM has received your NNAS advisory report. And please note that immigration status is not required to open an application with the CLPNM. As well, proof of language proficiency is required, but it is not required to open a file with the CLPNM nor to be referred for a CCA. So step 3 is the clinical competence assessment. Once you've completed your online application and paid and your file has been reviewed, you'll be referred to a clinical competence assessment. The CCA measures your nursing competence, including your ability to make sound clinical judgments in a variety of clinical situations. When you're referred for a CCA, the CLPNM will email you a referral letter along with the LPN CCA applicant guide, which provides detailed information from how to book the CCA to what's included in the CCA. Currently, our CCA is offered at the University St. Boniface. And the CCA includes a self-assessment that must be completed prior to the day of assessment. And on the actual day of assessment, you'll have objective structured clinical examinations, a pharmacology knowledge test and dosage calculations test, as well as clinical judgments that span across the lifespan and nursing care planning. So the CCA is approximately 8 hours, and if your CCA results show that you are not eligible to be referred to GAP or bridging or refresher education, you may be referred to a second CCA. And if unsuccessful on the second CCA, the CLPNM's executive director may allow you to attend a third CCA. So once you've completed your CCA, the CLPNM will assess the results. And step 4 is the outcome of your CCA. And so this will vary based on the applicant. And your next steps depend on if you were able to fully demonstrate the entry-level competencies, partially demonstrate, or if you were unable to demonstrate the competencies. So most applicants do demonstrate some of the entry-level competencies. So if this is the case, it might include education, which may include a referral to GAP training, to bridging education, or to some foundational education to prepare you for bridging education. So once you're ready to be referred to education, evidence of language proficiency is required, and we would also require the NNAS advisory report before we can refer you to education. So we have various means by which you can demonstrate or provide proof of language proficiency, and you'll see those on the screen here. So we have English language proficiency tests that are approved by the board. We have several different tests, both to demonstrate English or French language proficiency, and those you can find on our website in our policy. We also do have, we accept the academic IELTS 1 skill retake. So if you've taken the IELTS and if you meet the required language cut scores in 3 of the 4 skills, we will allow you to, instead of repeating the entire test over again, you can take 1 skill only. So in addition to language proficiency tests, we also do offer alternatives. So another way that you can provide proof of language proficiency is through an employer language attestation. So in order to qualify for this alternative, you must be employed in a healthcare setting by a specific Manitoba employer. And the CRPNM has a form that can be completed by the employer, and it's available upon request. And an applicant may also be deemed to meet the CRPNM's language proficiency requirement for registration if the executive director is satisfied that the applicant has successfully completed a nursing education program in another jurisdiction, provided that all the components of the program were instructed and evaluated in English or French, and that the program is one that is accepted by the CRPNM. And the CRPNM has also developed a form for this, which you would provide to the educational institution to complete and submit to the CRPNM. And for more information on language requirements, you can review our language policy on our website. So one outcome of the CCA is that you may be referred to what's called the Supervised Student IEN Gap Training Program, so the SIEN Gap Training Program. So the SIEN program has been established with specific Manitoba employers to provide IENs who are deemed eligible by the CRPNM the opportunity to be employed and work in a supervised capacity for an eligible Manitoba employer under the supervision of another nurse. And this is while they are completing bridging education requirements. So this program offers you the ability to gain exposure to the Canadian healthcare system and to Canadian healthcare culture in an environment where you have access to support from other nurses. You'd be given time away from work in order to participate in the required education, and you'd be able to complete the required supervised clinical experience through paid student IEN employment. And you would not be required to complete a separate clinical through an educational institution. So another outcome of the CCA is that you may be referred to all or some courses in the Practical Nurse Qualification Recognition Program, so the PNQR. This is an 18-week program at Assiniboine College, and it includes courses that are face-to-face, online, and it also includes clinical practicums and prep for the Canadian Practical Nurse Registration Exam. So not everyone referred to the PNQR has to take the full program. Courses that you are referred to are based on the results of your individual CCA assessment. So this means that some applicants will be required to take the full PNQR program, while others may only be required to take 1 or 2 courses from the PNQR. And individuals who have deeper and broader gaps may also be referred to some foundational courses, and these courses will help support their success in the PNQR program. These additional courses are offered through continuing education. And most of them are online delivery, but there are some in-person labs with that as well. So if you have been referred to the SIEN Gap Training Program, you'll have to take the required courses that you have been referred to through the PNQR or through continuing education. Those courses are offered at Assiniboine College, and your employer will give you time off to work time off work to join a cohort for your required PNQR classes. So once you've completed your course of instruction, the CRPNM receives a transcript from Assiniboine College. For those in the SIN gap training program, we receive the transcript as well as an employer evaluation to make sure that your practice is satisfactory and that you've completed the minimum required hours. So then we will review your file and email you correspondence with information on your next steps. So the next step would generally be graduate practical nurse registration. So you would, once you've demonstrated that you've met the entry-level competencies, you would apply for and obtain graduate practical nurse registration, which you would have while you wait to write the Canadian Practical Nurse Registration exam. So if you did not complete the CLPNM's jurisprudence education while taking bridging education, you would have to complete it before you're eligible for GPN registration and before applying to sit the CPNRE. Prior to the CLPNM processing your GPN application, you would also be required to obtain liability protection through the Canadian Nurses Protective Society. And once you are a graduate practical nurse, you are expected to write the CPNRE as soon as you have been directed to do so by the CLPNM. So the CPNRE is computer-based and it's virtually proctored. So that means that it can be undertaken anywhere, even in your home. And it's important to note that nearly all IENs who complete the process through the CLPNM, so meaning the Manitoba pathway, pass on their first attempt at the CPNRE. So after successfully sitting the CPNRE, you can now apply as a licensed practical nurse in Manitoba. So you would apply and pay for initial enrollment and active practicing registration. You must do this within 30 days of being notified that you've passed the exam. And your GPN registration also expires 30 days after you've passed your exam. So if you do not apply during this time, the CLPNM will allow you up to an additional 60 days, but you will not be able to work during this time because your GPN registration would have expired. So once your registration as an LPN has been approved, you can view your status on the public registry. And as an LPN, you are required to also engage in the continuing competence program and to renew your LPN registration annually. So for information on this process that we just discussed, I'd encourage you to go to our website and review the credential assessment guide for IENs. And we also have other information on our website, and I can provide the slides for this presentation as well. And we have with me here today Gail. She's our registration coordinator. So all things related to gathering application documents and questions about documents that need to be submitted, Gail can assist you with those. And then we also have Harpreet with me today, and she's the policy and registration consultant, and she assists with reviewing the file and then walking with the IEN through the whole process up to graduate practical nurse registration. If you have any questions, I encourage you to contact the CLPNM, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan, Christy, and Miranda for that informative or for those informative presentations. Now we'll open it up to the audience. If you have any questions, please enter your questions in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. We have only a couple of minutes for some questions, so we'll only take a few. Just because we're over time here. The first question that I have, it's for CRNM, for College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba. This is from Heidi. Heidi has commented and has a question as well. For candidates referred to as CCA by CRNM, they were given a time limit to complete the exam. What will happen if this time limit is exceeded before the new CCA site is offered? will the time limits be extended?
I mean, I can't comment right now if it was that CCA deadlines were going to be impacted. We would maybe take a look at that. Right now, we're not anticipating that will be the case. Applicants that have already been referred for a CCA have had until the end of February to book a CCA. But in any case, if an applicant exceeds their deadline and they're no longer eligible for like that current referral, there's always the option to be re-referred. So with individual scenarios, I'd invite you to reach out to us and we can discuss more specifically what certain situation someone may be in.
Okay, great, thank you. We have 2 more questions. And then unfortunately, we'll have to close the session. So Melanie, I will unmute you now. You may ask your question.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
My question, yes, my question's for IENRN pathway. If I choose to take the CCA, how many attempts am I allowed? And are there any preparatory courses before I take CCA?
Right, so applicants, according to our current policy, have 2 attempts of the CCA. So if you weren't satisfied with the outcome of your first CCA, you could opt to complete a second CCA. The college does not offer preparatory materials or courses to prepare for the CCA, but my understanding is currently that the University of Manitoba does have some professional development courses that may be useful. And my understanding is also that these, although the assessment center will no longer be providing CCAs, that those courses will continue to run. You'd of course have to follow up with them directly to ensure that this is the case.
Great, thank you. All right, our next question is from Zakira. Zakira, would you like to ask your question?
Okay, sorry about that. I just blocked my speakers. Hello, hi everybody. Can you hear
Hello.
me?
Yes,
Hello.
we can hear you.
Yes, I got a New York license from licensed registered licensed practical nurse, and I'm a licensed. I don't want to go to US and North Dakota, and they're offering 10,000 for me to go there. But I'm Manitoban. I've been living here for a while. I'm a Canadian, and I don't know if you guys let me register as licensed practical nurse because I passed my NCLEX, and actually I'm professionally I'm human resource Manitoba human resource professionally. I'm a Manitoban human resource candidate, but I'm just wondering if you guys, is there any way I can register? This is the last chance for Manitoba. I will go anywhere. There's offer there 10,000 sitting there because I got my license now. Just came yesterday. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a question. I encourage you to reach out to us directly, and we can have a conversation with you about that.
How I'm going, I have been calling for license of practical nurse office. I have been calling them. Nobody returned my text. Nobody returned my even email. Is there any way I can get a phone number and I can get hold of them? I can make appointment because I have family. I don't want to go anywhere.
Yeah, so there's contact information on the slides that we had, and I can provide the slides, and then you can reach out to Harpreet or to Gail, and we can help you from there.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Or you can
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Sorry
you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I would like to thank our presenters for the very informative session and the information that you provided with us today. So thank you very much. And of course, thank you to all the participants who attended this session. So on behalf of the Manitoba STAR team, I would like to thank you all for attending the event and stay well. Thank you.
What is the information now? Where is the information? I can see.